The galaxy had grown old and quiet with time, and in the silence of the stars, many races believed they already knew the full story of history. Yet there was one story that had been buried under fear and myth, and it was the story of humanity, for it was said that humans had been wiped away in wars long before the current empires rose, and in every academy children were taught that the humans were reckless and wild, and that they burned too bright and too fast, and that the flames of their wars consumed them until nothing was left. And so for generations no one searched for them, no one expected them, and no one ever dreamed that the name of Earth would be heard again. But one night in a forgotten outpost near the edge of the Orion reach, a signal came, and at first it was faint like a whisper moving through the cold of space, and the machines almost ignored it. But then the encryption showed, and the watchers of the station froze, for the signal was in human code, and it was ancient and precise, and it was impossible for anyone else to copy it. And in that moment the room filled with silence and fear, for if the signal was true, then the greatest secret of the stars had just awakened. The crew gathered around the old consoles, and their eyes were wide as the message repeated again and again, a single phrase carved in broken static, yet clear enough to pierce the soul. And the phrase was, "We endure," and though the words were simple, they carried weight like the pull of a black hole, because everyone knew what those words meant, and the memory of humanity returned like fire in the dark corridors of the station. Word spread quickly through the local channels, and soon every shipmaster, every trader, and every commander in the nearby sectors whispered the same question: how could humans speak again if they were gone? And what if the myths were wrong? And what if the old race had never been defeated at all, but had only vanished into shadows to wait for the right time to rise again? And the fear grew, because the galaxy remembered the old tales of human strength and human rage and human will, and some feared their return while others hoped for it. In the chambers of the alien councils, debates broke like storms, for some rulers said the signal was a trick, a lure perhaps set by pirates or hidden rivals, yet none could explain the encryption, none could break it, and none could deny that only humans had used those patterns in the long past. And the fear deepened, because every race knew that humans had always been clever enough to outthink their enemies and stubborn enough to fight until victory or death, and the idea that they might have survived in secret made even the strongest fleets uneasy. A small fleet was ordered to investigate the origin of the call, and its crew was filled with unease, for to follow the path of humanity was like stepping into a legend, and the old record said no ship had returned once it strayed too close to the ruins of Earth, and so the journey was heavy with dread, but the signal pulled them forward stronger and clearer with each passing day. Among the crew were voices that argued to turn back, for what if the humans had become monsters in their hiding? What if centuries of silence had turned them into something unrecognizable? But others said that knowledge was worth the risk, and that if humans truly lived, then the galaxy must be ready. And so the ship pressed on through the black of space, while the signal repeated over and over, "We endure," like a heartbeat waiting to be heard. The fleet reached the edge of the Sol system, and their sensors picked up the faint glow of a dead world drifting in darkness, and it was Earth, the cradle of the lost race, a place spoken of only in hushed tones in old libraries and forgotten archives. And the sight made even the bravest soldiers shiver, because the planet was scarred and broken, but still there, and the signal pulsed from its surface, as if the planet itself was alive. The captain of the lead vessel ordered silence, and the crew watched the ruined blue world with wide eyes, while the message burned into their minds: "We endure," and the words carried something ancient and unyielding, something that felt more alive than any star. And though the cities below looked like bones, and though the oceans seemed pale and wounded, the signal kept rising like breath from the Earth itself. The galaxy had believed that humanity was gone, that time had erased them, and that the fires of their spirit had cooled. Yet here was proof that the humans were not gone, and that they had been waiting or watching or perhaps rebuilding, and no one could guess what that meant for the future. But every being in that fleet knew one thing: nothing would ever be the same again. The crew argued in whispers as the ships circled Earth, for some believed they should cut the signal and run back to their home worlds, and warn their leaders that the old warriors were stirring again, and others said they should try to land and learn the truth, for knowledge was worth more than fear. But no matter the choice, they could not erase the sound of the words echoing in their minds, "We endure," and with each repetition the phrase felt stronger, as if it carried not only survival but promise. The captain stood at the window and looked down at Earth, and though it was broken, it seemed to glow with something untamed, and he wondered if perhaps the greatest mistake of the galaxy had been to believe that humans could ever truly die. And as the signal repeated, once more he knew that somewhere down there in the shadows of ruined cities and deep under mountains something was alive and waiting and listening, and the thought filled him with dread and awe all at once. And so the story of humanity was not finished, but only paused, and now the first sign of its return had shaken the galaxy awake, for the forgotten race had spoken again, and the whole universe would hear their words, "We endure." The council chambers across the stars were filled with voices that rose and fell like waves, for the signal from Earth had shaken every ruler, every merchant, and every fleet commander, and none could remain silent, because the return of humanity, even as a whisper, carried the power to change everything. In the grand halls of the Varn Dominion, the oldest counselor spoke of the stories that were told when she was young, stories of human soldiers who stood against endless armies and did not break. Stories of engineers who built ships from nothing but wreckage, and dreamed stories of wanderers who crossed the black void without fear, and she said if those people still lived, then nothing in the galaxy was safe nor stable. The Council of the Seraph League argued all through the night, for half the chamber wanted to send fleets at once to burn whatever remained on Earth and erase the threat before it grew, while the other half spoke with trembling voices of the gifts humanity once shared, of medicines and machines of fire that brought light to dark worlds. And they asked, what if the humans were not enemies but allies waiting for a new dawn? And their voices shook because deep down every seraph remembered the oath of peace sworn by their ancestors under human banners long ago. Meanwhile, the signal spread farther, carried by traders who could not keep secrets and smugglers who sold news like gold. And soon even the smallest worlds whispered the words, "We endure," and in those words the weak found hope. Because if humans could survive ruin, then maybe small nations could survive against empires, and in those words the strong found fear. Because if humans could rise again, then their thrones might fall, and so the galaxy trembled on the edge of change. On the fleet that had traced the signal, the crew argued as the stars drifted by their windows. Some believed they should return at once and deliver the truth, for already the weight of what they carried was crushing them. Yet others said they could not return empty-handed, for the councils would never believe only words, and they must uncover more proof on the ruined world itself. And so the debate burned with no answer, while the signal pulsed again. And again we endure. The captain walked alone in his quarters and remembered the old lessons of the academy, where humanity was spoken of like ghosts. Some teachers described them as demons who could not be stopped, while others described them as saviors who gave more than they took. And the captain realized the galaxy had always been divided on how to see humans. But one fact was shared in every tale: humans never gave up, they never bent. And if such a race had hidden for centuries, then their return would strike like a storm. Across the stars more councils gathered, and more voices rose in fear and greed, and hope for the Crovan Alliance began building secret fleets on the edge of their territory, whispering of a preemptive strike, while the humble colonies of the Rim spoke of sending messengers of peace, and the galaxy began to fracture into factions before humanity had even shown their face again. Back on the ship above Earth, the crew sent drones into orbit, and the machines scanned the surface ruins, and what they saw made their hearts race, for the cities, though broken, still pulsed faintly, with power lines of energy flowed beneath mountains, and towers that looked like graves hummed with quiet force, as if the world itself still breathed, and some whispered that maybe Earth was not dead but only sleeping. Then a young officer on the ship found an old record hidden in forgotten archives of his people, and he brought it to the captain. The record was a human broadcast from centuries past, filled with warnings and promises. It spoke of betrayal by alien allies and of a vow to vanish until the day came when humanity was ready to return stronger than ever. And at the end of the message the same words were written, "We endure," and the crew shivered, for the voices of the past matched the signal of the present. The captain called a meeting in the central hall of the ship, and every eye turned to him. As he spoke, he said they could not hide from what they had seen, for the galaxy would know the truth sooner or later, and if they carried lies, they would be torn apart by the councils. And he said that the choice before them was not whether humanity lived, but whether they would face that truth with courage or run from it like cowards. And his voice shook as he declared that they would land on Earth to see what waited in the shadows. The decision spread fear through the crew, but also excitement, for some wanted glory, some wanted knowledge, and some wanted only to live to tell the tale. But none could deny the pull of destiny that came with the signal, and so preparations were made for descent. And as the ship lowered through the silent clouds, every heart raced, for they knew that beneath them waited either ghosts or gods. The city stretched below them like broken bones, yet there were signs of hidden order. Lights flickered in towers, thought-long dead doors slid open and closed without touch, and the air carried the hum of unseen machines, and the crew whispered that perhaps humanity had never left at all, but had simply hidden beneath their ruined skin, waiting for strangers to arrive. The landing was hard. The ground cracked beneath the weight of the ship, and dust rose like smoke from an old battlefield. The crew stepped out in armor, with weapons ready, yet the silence of the land was heavy. Only the signal rang in their ears, "We endure," and though no figure appeared, the world felt alive, as if countless unseen eyes watched from shadows. In the distance, something moved. Tall machines that looked like statues at first began to turn their heads, and their eyes glowed red, and the crew froze as the machines started walking toward them in perfect silence, the sound of their steps like thunder in the dust. And the captain felt his heart race, for this was no graveyard. This was a place of waiting, and the humans had left guardians. And so the galaxy stood on the edge of a secret that had slept for centuries, and the crew on Earth knew that the shadows of the past were about to step into the light, and nothing would ever return to silence again. The fleet that circled Earth held its breath as the signal grew louder and clearer with each passing hour, for the words "we endure" were no longer faint whispers, but strong and steady like a drumbeat across the void. And though no one could explain how a ruined planet could call with such strength, every ear heard the message, and every heart felt the pull of something ancient and unbroken. And the crew of the lead vessel knew that what they carried was not only a signal, but a promise of something waiting beneath the scars of the world. As the ships descended lower through the gray skies, the ruins of cities stretched across the horizon like skeletons of giants, their towers cracked, yet still standing, their bridges shattered, yet still holding fragments of shape, and the sight filled the visitors with awe, because even in ruin Earth looked alive, as if its bones refused to fall into dust, and the signal pulsed through the clouds with rhythm that felt almost human, like a heartbeat that had waited centuries for someone to hear. The drones that scanned the land returned strange readings for power, surged beneath the crust in lines too straight to be natural, and radiation levels shifted with precision as if guided by hidden hands, and the crew whispered that the planet was breathing, that the machines of humanity had never truly stopped. And the more they looked, the more they believed that Earth itself was the source of the call, alive, with a will that could not be broken. The captain ordered the descent to continue, though many feared the choice, for the closer they came to the ground, the stronger the air vibrated with the message, "We endure," and some swore they could hear it inside their minds, not as sound, but as thought. And this frightened them more than any weapon, for it meant the message was not only broadcast through machines, but carried through something deeper, something that touched the living spirit itself. The landing took place on the edge of a city once called New York, though the crew did not know the name. Only the ruins of towers taller than mountains and streets wide as rivers filled their eyes. And as their boots touched the ground, the dust rose like ash from an ancient fire. The silence pressed heavy upon them. Yet through the silence came the same phrase, repeating like breath, "We endure." And though no figure greeted them, every step forward felt watched by unseen eyes. The first team moved through broken streets, their scanners lighting the shadows with beams of white. They found walls covered in old symbols of human history, banners torn, but not destroyed, statues cracked, but still standing, and each mark spoke of a people who refused to vanish. And one soldier whispered that this was not a graveyard, but a shrine that waited for its owners to return. Then the signal shifted. It no longer came only from the sky, but from the ground around them. Walls pulsed with hidden lights, streets glowed faintly beneath the dust, and a new voice rose within the signal, not words, but tones that shaped a path, guiding them forward. And the crew followed with dread and wonder, for they knew this was not chance, this was design. At the heart of the ruined city, they reached a plaza where a great tower had fallen, yet its base remained, and from that base came the strongest pulse of all. The drones hovered nervously above, scanning again and again, yet failing to map the deep tunnels below, and the captain realized the call did not come from ruins above, but from chambers buried deep within the earth. As the crew approached the tower base, hidden panels opened with a hiss of ancient air, and the ground shook with the sound of machines. Waking from long silence, the soldiers raised their weapons, yet none fired, for out of the panels rose shapes, not living, not dead, but guardians forged of steel, their frames scarred, yet glowing with power, and their faces blank save for burning eyes of red, and the message grew louder in their minds: we endure. The guardians did not strike, they stood in silence, as if waiting for command, and one by one the crew lowered their weapons, though their hands trembled, for they understood that the machines were not mindless. They were watchers left to protect something greater, and the fear grew heavy, for if these were only watchers, what lay deeper within the earth? Then the ground shook again, and from the depths came a sound like thunder rolling upward through stone. The plaza cracked open, and a vast platform began to rise, and upon it stood shapes that made the crew fall silent, for they were human, or at least they looked human, armored in black steel with visors that hid their faces and movements that were too smooth, too perfect, and they spoke as one voice that echoed not only in the air, but in the hearts of all who listened. "You should not have come here," they said, and the words were heavy like chains of iron. Yet beneath them was no anger, only warning, and the captain felt his blood run cold, because he realized that the distress call had not been a plea for help. It had been a summons, a lure perhaps, or a test, and they had answered without knowing what waited for them. The soldiers of Earth stood still as statues, their visors glowing with faint light, their presence alone enough to shake the will of seasoned warriors, and one of the alien crew whispered that the myth had been true: humans never died, they only hid and rebuilt, and now they had chosen to show themselves again, and the choice to come here had awakened something that could not be put back to sleep. The platform sank slowly back into the depths, leaving only the guardians behind, and the signal shifted once more, repeating the words, "We endure," yet now the phrase felt heavier, carrying not only survival, but warning, as if to say, "We are here, we are alive, and we are watching," and the crew understood that this was no accident. Humanity had allowed them to hear and see only what was meant, and that the true heart of Earth remained hidden beneath. The captain ordered retreat for now, and the crew pulled back to their ships with shaking hands and racing hearts. Yet, as they rose into the sky, they knew that nothing in the galaxy could silence what they had seen and heard, and that once the councils learned the truth, the stars themselves would tremble, for humanity had answered the call, and nothing would ever return to silence again. The fleet rose from the scarred face of Earth, yet no heart among the crew felt light for the vision of armored humans, and the red eyes of the guardians burned inside their minds. And even as the ships broke through the clouds, the signal still followed them, echoing in the air, "We endure," and the words clung like chains to every soul, and none could forget the weight of that message, or the voice that had warned them that they should not have come. And though their bodies left the surface of the world, their spirits remained trapped inside the shadow of what they had seen. The captain stood at the wide window of the command bridge, and his hands pressed against the glass, for below him Earth turned slowly, and though it looked like a broken jewel, cracked and scarred, there was life inside it, a power unseen, yet strong, and he knew that the guardians and the soldiers they had witnessed were not the last defense, but only the first layer of a hidden fortress, and he felt dread rise in his chest, for if humanity had created such machines and kept them alive in silence, then what else could be waiting beneath the crust? The crew whispered in fear and wonder. Some swore that the soldiers were not alive at all, but only machines wearing the shape of men, while others insisted they were real flesh and blood humans who had fused themselves with armor beyond alien understanding, and still others said it did not matter, for either way the fact was clear: humanity lived, and humanity had chosen not to vanish, but to wait, and the waiting meant purpose. The captain gathered his officers in the council chamber of the ship, and their faces glowed pale under the cold lights as they argued what to do next. Some begged to leave the system at once and deliver the warning to the councils of the galaxy before the truth consumed them, while others demanded to stay and search deeper for more evidence, for they believed words alone would never convince the rulers of the stars, and they needed proof. They needed something that could not be denied, and the chamber shook with voices as each side cried fear or curiosity, until the captain silenced them with a single command. He said that they had already gone too far to turn back with empty hands, and that if the galaxy was to know the truth, then they must see more than ruins and whispers. They must see the core of the human return. And though his own heart trembled, he ordered another descent, this time not to the ruins of a city, but to a location that the drones had uncovered near the great mountains, a place where the signal beat like the heart of a star, and the words "we endure" were strongest. The fleet descended once more, though every crew member felt that the planet itself was aware of them. And as the ships neared the mountains, the air shimmered with strange light that bent scanners and confused their instruments. Yet the signal guided them like a beacon, and at last they found a valley sealed with smooth black stone, as if carved by no natural hand. And from that stone came a gate tall as the clouds and wide as rivers, and on its surface were words, carved in the old language of Earth. Though none among the crew could read them, their shapes were sharp and unbroken, and they shone with a faint glow as if written with fire. The gate trembled as the ships lowered into the valley, and without touch it began to open, its vast walls sliding apart with a sound that rolled like thunder through the mountains. And inside the gate lay a cavern filled with machines larger than the ships themselves, their frames humming with quiet power, and their eyes glowing with pale blue light. And though they did not move, the crew felt their gaze heavy upon them, and fear spread like wildfire through every heart, for these were not guardians of the surface, but weapons of the deep. Then from the shadows of the cavern a figure appeared, and the crew gasped, for the figure walked with the grace of flesh and bone, and yet wore armor smooth and black with lines of light. Across it the face was hidden by a visor, but the shape was unmistakable. It was human, and the voice that spoke was calm and heavy and filled the valley. Without effort, you are intruders, the voice said. You have entered the heart of Earth without invitation, and for that you must answer. The captain stepped forward, though his legs felt weak, and he spoke with trembling words. He said, "We came not to invade, but to understand. We heard your signal and followed its call, and the galaxy believe you're gone. But now we see you live, and we ask only what you intend for the stars." And the figure stood in silence for a long moment before replying. The voice said, "Humanity does not explain to those who doubted. Humanity does not plead to those who betrayed. Humanity does not vanish. It waits, and it prepares, and when the time is right, it rises again." And then the figure raised an arm, and the machines in the cavern roared to life, their bodies shifting, their weapons glowing, and the sound filled the air like the cry of storm, and the crew fell back in terror. Yet the figure did not order attack. Instead it lowered its arm, and the machines went silent once more, and the message rang again in their minds, "We endure." The captain felt the weight of the words more than ever, for now he knew the signal was not only a message, it was a warning to all who might enter the shadow of Earth, that humanity was alive and watching and would not allow itself to be erased. And though he wanted to ask more, though he wanted to beg for peace, his voice was silent, for deep in his heart he felt that peace was not what the humans prepared for. They prepared for return. The figure turned and walked back into the cavern, and the gate began to close, its walls sliding shut with thunder once more. And as the valley fell silent, the signal pulsed steady and strong, echoing into the sky, "We endure," and the fleet rose once again, leaving the mountains behind, yet carrying the dread of what they had seen. And though the stars stretched endless above them, none felt free, for the encounter with Earth had shown them the truth. Humanity was not gone. Humanity was waiting, and when they chose to step from the shadows, the galaxy itself would tremble. The fleet drifted above Earth with silence heavy inside every deck, for the vision of the gate and the figure within the mountain cavern clung to their minds, and no words could erase the echo of the machines that roared to life when the human raised an arm. And though the sound had faded, the memory of it struck harder than any weapon, for it told them clearly that Earth was not broken, but waiting, and that the power of humanity had not died with the old wars. It had only been hidden in the dark. The captain stared at the blue and gray sphere turning below, and his chest felt heavy with the weight of choice, for the councils would demand answers, and the people of the stars would demand proof. Yet the proof he carried was almost too much to believe, and if he returned now with tales of soldiers of steel and machines that moved like mountains, he knew many would call him a liar. Yet if he stayed too long, Earth itself might choose to silence him and his crew for secrets this old were never met for easy hands. Among the crew, fear and wonder fought like fire and ice. Some begged to leave at once to run from this cursed world before it awakened fully and struck them down, while others whispered of glory and knowledge and the chance to be the first to uncover the hidden empire of men, and the arguments spilled across every corridor and mess hall until the captain silenced them with his voice and ordered stillness, for he said the choice was already made by Earth itself, and not by them. For even as they argued, the signal changed. It no longer spoke only the words "we endure," but shifted into something deeper, a pulse that shook their bones and spread through their veins. And when they looked upon the surface, they saw the ground tremble and the ocean stir, as if the world itself had awakened, and lightning cut through the clouds, though no storm was born, and the message grew louder, not only in their ears, but in their thoughts and hearts. "We endure, we rise, we return." The crew gathered at the windows as lights began to spark across the continents below. Great circles of fire burned into life along coastlines and mountain ridges, and the shapes of vast machines rose from hidden chambers in the ground towers, lifted from beneath the seas, their surfaces glowing with energy that no scanner could measure. And the planet itself seemed to open its eyes after centuries of sleep, and every soldier, every officer, every visitor on those ships felt the same truth Earth had not only endured, it had been waiting for this very moment. The captain whispered to himself that they had not come as explorers, but as witnesses, for the awakening of humanity was not theirs to control. It was already written long before their birth, and he felt his heart shake as the lights on Earth grew brighter and beams of energy struck into the sky, forming patterns and networks like a web that wrapped the planet and pulsed outward into the black void, as if calling to every corner of the galaxy, announcing to all that humanity lived. The guardians of steel that stood in the ruins began to move, with purpose, their red eyes burning, as they marched through streets that had been silent for ages, and the machines that had slumbered in the mountains began to rise, their forms like titans, their weapons glowing with power older than any empire. And though none of them attacked the fleet, every movement carried a message: you are not safe here, you are not in control, this is the time of return. The crew felt the weight of that warning, yet none dared fire or flee, for they were caught between terror and awe, and even if they wished to run, their hearts told them that the galaxy itself was already hearing the new call for the beams of light from Earth carried across the stars, and no world could ignore them, no empire could claim ignorance, and no ruler could deny that the forgotten race had awakened. In the council chambers far across the galaxy, the signals were received, and panic erupted. Leaders shouted over each other as they realized the ancient fear had come alive again, for humanity had not only survived, but chosen to reveal its strength in a way no one could hide. In factions that had debated in whispers now turned to open cries. Some demanded preemptive war to crush the awakening before it spread, while others fell into silence, for they knew that such a war would not end in victory, but in ruin. Back aboard the fleet, the captain closed his eyes as the message filled the ship like thunder: we endure, we rise, we return. And he knew that whatever the councils decided, it no longer mattered, for the choice belonged to Earth and to the humans who had hidden in shadow until their time had come. And he felt a strange mix of fear and respect, for he realized that no other race could have done what humanity had done. They had vanished from the stage of stars, only to return stronger, brighter, and unbroken. The crew watched as the ocean split open, revealing vast ports where ships larger than mountains rose from the deep, their hulls sleek, their engines burning with light that no alien design could match. And though they did not leave the planet, the sight alone was enough to make the visitors shiver, for those vessels were not built for show. They were built for war and for conquest and for survival, and the promise of their power screamed through every bolt and every line of light. The captain ordered the fleet to retreat to a safe distance, for he feared that if they remained too close, the humans might see them as threats and end their journey before it began. Yet, as they pulled away, he realized the humans had already chosen mercy, for if Earth had wanted them destroyed, they would never have left the surface alive, and he wondered if that mercy was warning as much as kindness. As the ships left orbit, the crew looked back one last time at the awakening world, and they felt as if they had seen the birth of a storm that would sweep across every star. For Earth was no longer silent, Earth was no longer broken, Earth had risen again, and in that moment all who saw it knew that history itself had turned and nothing would ever be the same for the galaxy. The fleet drifted in silence at the edge of the Sol system, their engines low, their voices hushed, for none could escape the weight of what they had seen, and though the crews tried to speak, their words fell weak, for the sight of Earth awakening burned inside them brighter than any sun. The towers of light, the guardians of steel, the ships that rose from oceans, all of it was a vision that no being in the galaxy could forget, and the message still thundered in their hearts. We endure, we rise, we return. And it was more than words, it was a vow. The captain gathered his senior officers once more in the command hall, their faces pale under the lights, their hands trembling as they argued what must be done, for the councils would demand not only stories, but truth carved in iron, and the captain said they had already seen enough to change the galaxy forever, yet they must hold steady and gather all knowledge they could before returning, for the humans had revealed themselves in shadow, but the deeper truth of their long silence was still hidden. And without that truth, the galaxy would drown in fear. As the debate raged, the signal shifted again, not in words, but in patterns, lines of sound and rhythm that shaped symbols across the ship consoles. And when the translators worked, they revealed maps of old human colonies across the galaxy, some long believed dead, some long believed empty. And beside the maps were words carved in simple strength: we never left. And the crew froze, for this was not only about Earth, it was about everywhere humanity had once touched. The captain felt his chest tighten as he understood the meaning. If Earth had survived then, so had others scattered in silence across forgotten worlds, waiting and building and preparing, and he realized the awakening of Earth was only the first voice in a chorus yet to come, and soon the galaxy would hear them all, and he wondered if anything could stop what was now rising. Then another transmission came, and this one was clear of voice, speaking calm, steady, and heavy with power. It said, "We are the children of Earth, we are the survivors of betrayal, we are the fire that cannot die, and you who listen must know that our silence was not surrender, it was judgment, for we saw the galaxy turn against us, and we saw allies break their oaths, and we chose to vanish, to endure until our time returned, and that time is now." The crew trembled as the voice continued. It said, "We have built in shadows, and we have remembered every name and every world and every betrayal, and we have remembered every kindness as well. And when we return, we will not come as beggars nor as victims, we will come as ourselves, and the galaxy will face us as we are unbroken and unyielding." And the voice ended with the same vow: we endure, we rise, we return. The officers looked at one another with eyes wide as moons, for the truth was revealed. Humans had not been destroyed. They had chosen exile, chosen silence, chosen patience. And in that silence, they had become something greater than the galaxy ever imagined. And though the words carried anger, they also carried promise, for humanity had remembered kindness, and that meant hope still burned alongside wrath. The captain whispered that the galaxy was not ready for this truth, for already the councils tore themselves apart in fear, and already empires had sharpened their blades, and if humanity rose with fire, then the stars would drown in blood. Yet if humanity rose with mercy, then perhaps a new dawn could be born, and the choice of path belonged not to the galaxy, but to the humans who had waited. Meanwhile, Earth continued to awaken. Across its surface, new towers rose, new ships lifted from seas and skies burned with power, and across distant worlds faint signals began to echo and answer, as if colonies long forgotten now stirred in response to their cradle world, and the crew watched in awe as the map revealed more lights one by one across the dark, endless void, and they knew the truth: the galaxy had never been free of humanity, it had only been blind. The youngest officer on the ship asked the question all feared: "What do we do now?" And the captain could only shake his head, for no command manual, no council decree, no ancient story had prepared them for this moment. The only thing he knew was that they carried the truth, and the truth could not be silenced. And though the galaxy might try, though rulers might threaten, though armies might rise, the truth would spread because humanity itself was spreading. The voice returned one last time before the signal faded. It said, "You have seen the beginning, but you will not see the end. Return to your people and tell them what you saw, but do not twist our words, for we will know. And when the time comes, the galaxy will stand before us, not in rumor, but in fact, and then the stars will decide their fate." And the voice ended and silence fell heavy. The captain gave the order to withdraw, for the fleet could linger no longer without risking destruction. And as they turned away from Earth, the crew looked back at the glowing sphere one last time, and each felt the same fear and wonder, for they had witnessed not the end of an old story, but the start of a new one, and the galaxy would soon write it in fire and light. When the ships jumped into faster paths through space, the signal still rang in their bones. "We endure, we rise, we return." And though they left the Sol system behind, they knew it would never leave them, for the truth had been revealed. And the truth was this: humanity was alive, humanity was awake, and humanity was coming. The fleets of the Council trembled across the stars as whispers of Earth spread faster than light. Some called it a myth, some called it madness, some called it the end of all they knew, yet none could deny the fear that settled in every hall, every throne, and every chamber of power. For when one fleet returned with proof, when one crew carried the voice of Earth to the galaxy, nothing could silence the truth any longer, and though rulers shouted to dismiss it, their eyes betrayed them with terror. For they remembered the wars of old, they remembered human fire and human defiance, and deep in their hearts they knew the truth had come alive again. The captain who had carried the signal stood before the council, vast and cold and filled with 1,000 species. And as he spoke, silence spread across the chamber. He said, "We have seen Earth, and Earth has spoken, and they claim they endured, they claim they rose, and they claim they will return. And though some of you may doubt, I tell you now that their voice was real, their ships were real, their light was real. And if you ignore this truth, you will lead your people into ruin." And his words fell like thunder across the hall. The council erupted with fear and fury. Some shouted that humanity must be crushed before it spread again. Some shouted that peace must be offered before blood burned the stars. Some shouted that the galaxy could never survive another human rise, and voices clashed like blades until the chamber shook. Yet in the end, no decision could be made, for unity was broken and trust had shattered, and each empire left the chamber with shadows in their eyes. Meanwhile, across forgotten worlds, strange signals awoke. Old human outposts, once thought dead, flickered with light again. Colonies hidden in silence for centuries began to answer the cradle world, and ships of ancient design lifted into the skies, once more carrying banners of Earth, carrying the same vow: "We endure, we rise, we return." And though they were few at first, they grew with each passing day until the dark of space began to glow with their presence. Merchants whispered of human shadows appearing on trade routes, rescuing stranded ships, defeating raiders with speed and strength no one could match. Diplomats told of strange visitors cloaked in steel who came with words of warning and words of hope. Scientists spoke of transmissions filled with knowledge lost for ages, offered in exchange for nothing but patience. And every story spread the same fear and the same awe: humanity was no longer silent. Humanity was moving. The captain who had first heard the voice found himself haunted by dreams. He saw stars burning, he saw fleets broken, he saw Earth standing proud against the endless dark, and he wondered if the galaxy was being offered a chance or a warning. And though he tried to push the visions away, they clung to him until he understood that his life was forever tied to theirs, for he was the one who carried their message first. He was the one who would be remembered when the chronicles were written. On Earth itself, the awakening grew stronger. Towers rose higher, ships grew larger, the sky filled with fire as industries long hidden beneath oceans and mountains roared to life, and people gathered across plains and cities, their voices rising as one, chanting the vow: "We endure, we rise, we return." And every chant sent waves of power into the stars. Every chant was a promise carved in light. Across the galaxy, young species listened with wide eyes, for many had only known stories of human strength and sacrifice, stories told as warnings or bedtime tales. Yet now they heard the truth. Now they felt the truth in their bones, and many began to hope for protection, to hope for guidance, to hope for something more than the endless politics and cruelty of the great empires, and quietly some began to prepare to answer humanity's call. But not all looked with hope. Many empires sharpened their weapons, forged new fleets, gathered armies on a scale never seen, for they believed war was inevitable. They believed humanity would come with vengeance and nothing else. And so they swore to strike first, to crush the fire before it grew too bright. And already their fleets moved into shadow, waiting, watching, hunting for a chance to strike. Yet humanity was not blind, for their eyes reached far, their ears listened wide, and their patience was deep as oceans. And when they saw the fleets gather, when they heard the whispers of fear, they did not retreat. Instead, they sent a final message across the galaxy, a message that no being could ignore. The voice returned strong, calm, and endless. It said, "We have endured in silence for ages. We have risen in shadow. Without aid, we have returned with strength born of patience and memory. And we offer you choice. You may stand with us and shape a dawn greater than any before, or you may stand against us and see the stars burn. We do not seek revenge. We do not seek conquest. But we will never bow again. We endure, we rise, we return." And with those words, the message ended. For a time, the galaxy held its breath, waiting for the first strike, waiting for the first fleet to fall, waiting for the first war to begin. Yet nothing came at first, only silence, only fear, and only the slow rising of human light across the stars. And though some called it peace, it was not peace, it was the moment before thunder. The captain looked to the stars from the deck of his ship and felt the weight of history pressing down upon him. He knew he had been witness to the birth of something vast. He knew that soon the galaxy would not be the same. He knew that when the chronicles spoke of this age, they would mark it as the era of human return. And he whispered to himself words that matched the vow of Earth: "We endure, we rise, we return." And he swore to remember them until his final breath. And so the story began, not with the end of humanity, but with its rebirth, not with silence, but with fire, not with defeat, but with the endless return of a people who could never truly be broken. And the galaxy waited in shadow for the day when Earth would rise in full and the stars themselves would tremble.